guidelines influence children's behavior. Dr. Lwin is also serving on board in the Media Literacy Council. All right, let's join together and welcome Professor Lwin.
Good afternoon, parents, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My presentation this afternoon is going to be pulled from the academic research that I've done over the past couple of years. And in that sense, I'm going to not be wearing the hat of a parent. I also happen to be a parent of 2 teens. And perhaps if I were to share my experiences as a parent, it would include some real trials and tribulations. And I wish that, sometimes parenting could be just like academic research, everything very scientific, and whatever input will result in certain positive outputs, but it's not always been so. But this afternoon, I hope to share with you some of the interesting work that myself and scholars in cybersafety have been doing. And I'll cover first some of the dimensions of cybersafety, and that would be followed by looking at agents of cybersafety and perhaps lessons on what parents can do. Now, cybersafety in the greater realm is a very complex environment, and there are so many cyber safety issues. But we know that harassment, privacy concerns, and online addiction are some of the key issues facing young people today. Now, when we look at harassment threats, a number of key areas have been identified as being particularly pressing. You've heard of Parental talking about cyberbullying, but areas like online harassment and cyber stalking are also on the rise. So online harassment refers to constant negative pestering and giving somebody a hard time, but not necessarily amounting to cyberbullying. And cyber stalking, just like physical stalking, involves people trying to stalk and see if they can find out personal and other types of information about a particular person, and that can go on for many years. So scholars have documented the rising threat of these different types of behaviors online, and that these can cause psychological and physical harm to children. Now, many of these behaviors are, of course, related to increased internet use. And where we talk about, education and cyber safety education as a whole, it is really not just for young people and children per se. We ourselves, our generation, and the elderly are all constantly learning about cyber safety and learning how to deal with the threats in the internet world at the same time. So it's kind of an interesting situation where we have a generation of non-digital natives trying to guide young people, right? So one of the things that the scholars have pointed out is that in terms of the educational knowledge that is really needed to deal with cyber safety issues across the lifespan, and like I mentioned just now, the science and the art, it is not just the scientific aspect of it. It's not just knowing what to say no to and what to say yes to and not doing certain types of things. It is really coming up with a balanced or a nuanced approach to being able to assess the whole cyber environment and being able to define what the threats are, and that applies to us too. For example, children and many users are very attuned to the potential of cyber predators or strangers trying to do negative things to them. But not many people, for example, are aware of areas like data agents and marketers who may themselves pose threats as well. So for example, if we talk about data agents, so what are they? So they're kind of like these shadowy organizations that make money from collecting a lot of data. So your data and mine are all worth a lot of money to these organizations. And if you were a marketer or if you were an organization that wanted to target particular types of individuals, you can ask these agents for a list of names, addresses, and so on, and they have different types of price ranges. The more comprehensive and detailed the data is, the more they would charge. Okay, typical going rate for name, address, phone number, etc. in Singapore is $1. But if you have $5 for the information, they can get you very fine detail, granular detail as well. So these agents, for example, may be able to collect data from many types of devices. For example, if you were to download information on your handphone, right? Sometimes it might ask you, oh, can you give your email address? Can you give your height and weight or other types of information that is being collected? And once you give that information then would be captured. It also happens in the physical world. You go to an event, you are asked to drop your name card in a little fish bowl, which you think will allow you to win an interesting prize. But somebody takes that data and then it becomes part of the overall collected data that could be sold. So, throughout our lives, we have to learn to kind of discern when the information is worth giving and when it is not. And the general rule of thumb for us adults, which we have learned from trial and error, is that government or bona fide organizations are safe for us to divulge information. For marketers, if you have a long relationship, for example, with banks, for hotels and so on, it might be okay to give the data as well. But as it progressively moves down, you will have learned to assess at what stage you might not want to give a lot of data to. For example, if you go to a beauty spa and they are asking you all these different types of information about your health, for example, you may not feel comfortable to divulge that. But these are the types of nuances that young people will have to learn and to discern and almost, be able to master the art of cyber safety as they grow. So that is one dimension. It is the nature of the organization and the entity that they are dealing with. And another dimension is pertains to the type of information that is given out. Both Farrell and Edmund talked about, the young people giving out different types of information from what time I'm brushing my teeth to what I had today and so on. But the categories of information that typically are given out can fall into two very sensitive ones. One in particular is called PID, or personal identifying information. So for example, your birth date is a sensitive info but may not be directly related to you. Your IC or your phone would be the personal identifying information. With your IC, somebody can actually track you down and physically pose a threat to the individual. So this is a chart from the United States Pew survey, which is a large survey that they do across the country. And they found that for most people, they were able to find a photo. And when this was first started, a photo on its own would be not considered personal identifying information. But within 2 or 3 years, with advances in technology, facial recognition, a photo of you has become personal identifying information. So that's how, even in the informational world, it has changed. Your email address, your employer company you work for, not directly personal identifying information, but still you can track someone down with that sort of information. Again, similar to the school that your child would be in. And many children, say, I am in primary 5E, I'm in this primary school, and that poses some type of risk too. On the bottom part here, in the United States, some people, and many people in fact, 20% have divulged their political affiliation. This in particular is called sensitive personal data. So in sensitive data, what it means is that it is type of lifestyle information that can be used to profile an individual when they grow up or, at a certain point in their lives. So oftentimes we might put some things about our beliefs, our opinions and so on, and it could pose some kind of sensitivity in the future as well. So, so these are the different types of environmental navigation that many young people will have to go through, and even as the internet continues to change. Now, why is this in particular of threat to young people? Because many researchers have found, and unfortunately, from the Pew Research, I could not get the young people and older people breakdown, but that older and younger person breakdown looks exactly like this chart, which is for people earning more money and less money. So, but what it says is that the types of negative experiences arising from what they put online is a lot stronger. So the dark line shows that that the types of threats they are faced is a lot higher for young people than for older people. So we all may undertake the same behaviors as young people, but we are not subject to the same type of threats, not as much anyway. When we look at why this is, it is possibly due to the fact that a lot of our young people are involved in social networking. Okay? And this is, on all different types of devices, both again that Farrell and Edmund have talked about. So you kind of see this spike down here. And if you look at the number of hours that is actually spent online, young people outstrip older people by a large margin as well. I am doing different types of studies, both in primary and secondary schools, and sometimes when I ask the children now, how many hours do you spend every day on digital media, they give me information like 30 hours and 40 hours. And I would say, but then every day there's only 24 hours, and they'll say, yes, but I actually sleep for 10 hours, and the remaining 12 hours, I have 3 things going on at once. My mobile phone, my internet, and then something that's like being digitally streamed at the same time. So they are on 3 different devices. So they count 10, 10, 10, and it became 30 hours, right? But the number of hours and exposure is certainly going up. So when we talk about the amount of exposure being related to the threats can go beyond the harassment that I talked about. For example, in the personal identifying information, what we are seeing is the increased identity theft and misuse of identity. So there are many people who are posing as somebody else. And for Singaporeans, please look after your IC and your passport very well, because Singapore passports are a premium. They fetch $25,000 on the black market. Okay, my father lost his passport, and somebody is running around as him. And when he went to Australia, he was detained for about 12 hours because that person had, gone in and had done some illegal things in Australia. So, of course, this is an extreme case of identity theft, but with the Singapore identities are very much in demand. Many people want to use Singapore identities. Okay, so ID theft is on the rise, and many children may not face these threats until they are much older, but if they have given out things and if they have provided a lot of things that they're not able to information they're not able to take back, then these threats can come downstream. Okay, so that relates to cyber ID trail as well. In terms of sensitive personal data, there is also a rise of something called cyber profiling. So it could be employers who are profiling a certain type of employee when they interview. It could be organizations that are trying to target, and this is not legal, but it is being done, what type of customers they want, what type of people they want to have in the club, and so on. So this type of profiling, although not legal, is on the rise, especially in the United States. So, in the work that I have been doing, we looked at what are the different actions that can be taken to minimize the risks related to internet technology. And we identified the three based on surveys in both primary and secondary schools. One was other adolescents and children. And this was a survey that was done in secondary school. So we have, it was mainly based on adolescents. Parents, and we identified that parents played a very important role, and also teachers and educators. So all three are identified as socialization agents who will influence our children. So specifically on the parents, well, what can parents do? You know, it is very easy to say that you should talk to the kids more and you should teach them about certain types of things, but what sort of efforts to, you know, to undertake to navigate the complexities of this very complicated internet world? I'll come back to this in just a sec. In the research that I've done, we found two different dimensions of parenting being especially helpful in trying to mediate children's behavior. Okay, the first pertains to what is known as generic rulemaking, or trying to set certain boundaries on what the children could and could not do. The second relates to talking and being able to have conversations with children that are friendly in nature and show some kind of not talking down, but talking from person to person. Okay. So these two dimensions, which are here and here, come together to create what we call the parental mediation matrix. And from there, we are able to obtain 4 different types of parenting styles. Okay, I'm so sorry, it's a little bit academic and we have these, you know, different names, but I'll try to flesh out what they mean. So in one instance, you have got parents who are very low in regulation, but very high, there is a mistake here. I've just noted it is supposed to be low in active mediation. Okay, so that means the parent is very easygoing, and the parent typically just leaves everything to the child. You can do whatever you want, or I don't know what you're doing, but you know, just don't let me know. I know that none of you in this room are in that category because by being here, you're already very involved, okay? But there is a large number of parents who do fall into this category, and sometimes not by choice. You know, the parent could be very busy working and leaves the parenting to other caregivers, etc. Now, in another scenario, so remember this one is supposed to be high, what happens is that the parent is high in restriction, and then and is low in active mediation. And so what happens is that they spend the time setting out a lot of rules. So they will say no handphone until you are 21, no internet on weekdays, no Facebook until you are 16. No, okay? And study. Okay? So you have this very restrictive parent as well. Okay? So don't look at these right now because they are messed up. Then you have another type of parent called a promotive parent. So in this particular scenario, this parent is somebody who is very concerned and always tries to talk to the child, and and to find teachable moments when they can share experiences and so on. So they will talk about, what sort of scenarios might be dangerous online, or what you should do if you think somebody is bullying you, but not in a way that really kind of restricts or talks down to them, okay, but in a very friendly and educational manner. and asking them to share their experiences. So again, here research has found that it is not just about a one-way communication when we talk about promotive behavior, but opening the channels of communication. And sometimes what you need to do is to ask a question before giving or dispensing advice. So for example, like if you see something in the newspaper about somebody who's got bullied or who got into trouble, you can talk about, have you heard about this? What do you think? And has such a thing happened in your school, for example? And then use that to lead the conversation. Then you have something called a selective parent. A selective parent tries to do everything. Okay, so on the one hand, they were like, okay, let's talk about this. You're my best bud. Be my friend on Facebook and share with me your experiences. But at the same time, after 10 o'clock, you should switch off the computer. You should study. So they try to kind of put in, all the things that they know about parenting and combine them. And this is called a selective set of parenting. So which one do you think would be most effective in helping to navigate your kids to be more cyber safety conscious? This one is a lot of things. And then promotive, they talk. This one restrict. This one tidak apa, right? Intuitively, we would think that if you do a lot of things, it would be very helpful. So we did research to try and find out how these different types of parenting styles would influence the children's knowledge as well as the preparedness to deal with cyber safety issues. And in this research, we were looking at whether the kids could identify the threats. They found it easy to protect, and whether they also felt enabled, from that type of parenting style. Okay, I'll just skip that for a sec. And here you would see that as you expected, the selective. Don't worry about the two lines. I'll explain that in a sec. But here, basically, the selective kids tended to disclose less information. So this was actually behavior, how much sensitive information they were disclosing. Okay? And we have different types of coding for different types of information that they disclose. So selective is good, but promotive also is pretty good here, quite close. And then restrictive, not very good. And of course, the laissez-faire kids were disclosing the most amounts of information. However, we ask ourselves, is this uniform for primary and secondary schools? And is there a difference between, children who are preteens and kids who move into the teen years with regards to how they respond to parenting style? And this time, we put in, so this is where the two little lines are. We put in one more item, which is that we did an experiment where we asked them to look at a website. Actually, they looked at lots of websites, but in this particular website, we put a sign there, do not enter unless you are 18 years old. Okay? And we found that, and here there's one parental mediation strategy missing. We only tested these three because we found that for secondary school, it is very hard to find the selectives because somehow in secondary school, you just cannot, keep being involved in everything that they do. Okay, so parents were a little bit less involved in secondary school, and we found that when the kids were slightly younger, the response was like just now, what we had expected, with laissez-faire, restrictive, and promotive going down this way, but it responded to the safeguards. Okay. Don't. It might be a little bit academic here, but what we found is that this line flipped, meaning that when the children grew older, they actually wanted to, to enter the site more when the safeguard was present. If you tell them don't do, they wanted to do it. Okay? And that the rule making that was so effective when the children were younger was less effective. And in fact, it tended to backfire as the kids grew older. So what that means is that promotive mediation is probably more effective for older children, and that including rules might not really serve them in the best stead. Okay. So in other studies, similar types of trends were found, and this particular one looked at pathological internet use, so internet addiction, that, sometimes the more the parents nagged, especially when the kids were older, the more likely it was for the children to continue to use, but in some very unexpected circumstances. For example, children who wake up at 2 in the morning to use the internet so that the parents would not know, and in the secrecy and so on, and borrowing their friends' handphones and so on. But where the younger children are concerned, it was a similar trend, that children who feel comfortable talking to the parents, conversing with them and so on, had lower risk of developing compulsive internet use. So it also was found to have the same effects there. So in conclusion, a lot of the research really does agree with what Edmund has experienced as a father, that cyber safety issues are here to stay. They will continue to be prevalent, and families do need to play a very active role in cyber safety education. But where parents are concerned, what is recommended is that you can introduce rules when the children are young, especially in lower primary, and then relax the rules as you go along. So it's almost as if parents cannot have one cookie cutter approach for different stages of the children's lives. And as they grow older, you're going to have to adapt and change the strategies to match their different types of cognitive and affective development as teenagers. When they go to junior college and university, you probably have to step back even more. But if you have developed the friendships and the family, bonding that Edmund had mentioned, then that's likely to continue to help to safeguard the child through, so that if they face any problems, even when they are grown up, they can always turn to you and they can always talk to you about their problems, right? And very interestingly, I was watching a lot of the TV coverage for the late M.M. Lee, and I did notice that he seemed to have various types of adaptation strategies in parenting as his kids grew up. And there was one particular case, I think, when he talked about his giving a lot of guidance on the type of educational opportunities that the children had. And then when the younger son wanted to go to university, I think they wanted him to go to Harvard, but he wanted to go to Stanford. And I think, at that time, they really took a step back and allowed the child, no longer a child, but the young man, to take the lead and make his decisions. So it's, I think, really there are so many learning experiences from there. And I would like to conclude by saying that, research in this area is still growing, and it continues to evolve. And I look forward to feedback and any other types of questions that you have when we have the panel discussion next. Thank you very much.